to the Berwick Public Library. We do a lot of programming here for all different topics, but one of our biggest and most loved library supporters is Ross Bachelder.
I'm a fanatic about books, yes.
Yes, and art and music, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce, I don't think I have to introduce him to all of you, but Ross is here tonight to talk about his newest book, Cecelia by Moonlight. I always want to say in Moonlight, but by Moonlight. I'm not even going to attempt to give a little brief thing.
It's all
That's
right.
going to be your
Yep.
job. But when I say that libraries depend upon people in the community to make them great, Ross is the person I think of in our community who always steps up to plate, whether it's me having a maker day and I have to say, I need an artist, can you teach kids how to do something with art? And he shows up and he has canvases and paints and he's with the children. To book talks like this, he's had his Happy Dog Walks the Sad Man, Remarkably Varied Adventures of a Confirmed Art Multiple, and Revenge, Tales Best Told in the Dark, or Read in the Dark. And I did read them, and I didn't read them in the dark.
You're still speaking to me. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm hoping Cecelia by Moonlight's going to be a little lighter.
You can wish whatever you want. Yes.
That's making me scared, but I'm going to lose my voice. Ross Bachelder.
Thank you. All right. Well, it's really quite thrilling, not just that there are a lot of people here, but that virtually every one of them I know. So it's a very heartwarming thing to do. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, good evening. So glad that you came here. I like to think that it takes a very special kind of person to tear themselves away from television to come and listen to ideas and books. And thank God for all of you, right? People who really can fit in just thinking, you know, and sharing instead of regurgitated entertainment, which is not to say it's bad at all, but we have to find room for different experiences, and you get a lot of interplay in an event like this. So thank you so much to my publisher, Chisholm Isa, and her husband Ernest. Can you wiggle your hand? Thank you. And some of you don't know that they came down all the way from St. John's, New Brunswick, Canada, for this event. I say give them a hand for Carrie. And I know she's fanatical about books too, and it really shows she's a real pro and a wonderful person to have landed in my world. So glad. And I might as well get this part over with. I thought, man, these people that came all the way down here, and I want you to go home with something, so I have a little something for you, and I wanted them to know, on behalf of not just me, but Sharon the librarian and everyone else, we want you to go away with something. So it's a painting I did. It's kind of thematic for the area. Is a crab from the streets of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. There you go. You're welcome. And I'm going to confess to you that if there's something missing, there's a story behind that. Notice that some of his, what do we call I got an anthropologist and a scientist, Michael Gibbons. What do you call the appendages of a crab?
Claws.
Okay, I thought it was going to be in Latin, but hey, okay. Anyway, the story is that I'm interested in everything, anything, including us, who have, we're mortals. And I would constantly find crabs and other creatures on the bridge between Kittery and Portsmouth, and there was a story in that. So I called it Abandoned and Mistreated or something. Yeah, but it's more emotional because of that, right? Yeah. So does anybody need chairs? Because looks like we're 2 chairs short. Yeah, okay. And others I wanted to mention here, I'll get back into. I also wanted to bring up Sharon Kelly, our the head librarian. Where are you, Sharon? If you want to see who she is and you missed it.
You all saw me.
And then we have, and then we have Elena Goodnow. Wave your hand, please.
She's in her office.
Oh, okay, but she's the assistant librarian. And then I couldn't resist mentioning Ralph Morang and Terry Wright of the Berwick Community Media, who have really transformed the town with the quality of they have filled the vacuum that existed when the Democrat and so many other papers just couldn't afford to come across the bridge and cover us like they used to. So it's pretty astonishing. I think it's, hope nobody hears from the Democrat, it's done in some respects better than a paper that's struggling. Excellent local coverage. Yeah, okay. And let's see, Kristen Doloff is the Berwick Library Association president. And the vice president of the BLA is Lori Pierce. And thank you to all of you for making this possible. This town is booming culturally. Now, somebody who hasn't been here might say, what? Every town grows or fails to grow, and Berwick is in the middle of a huge growth spurt with the Eds. The downtown is booming, and it's pretty exciting to be a part of it. Businesses and places to eat, places to walk. Love it. All right. I wish 3 people I'm going to name now were here, but life has a way, doesn't it? So we had 3 devoted lovers of the place, and they're no longer with us. Paula Lepore, Brian Sincata, and Ann Vaughn, who've all passed, but they made huge contributions to this library, and we will be remembering them for a very long time. Okay, I want to say thank you to all of the, when we drive through town and you see all of those laborers in the terrible weather, they're pouring cement, they're shoveling, and they're a part of the success. They really are. We need to remember that when we go by. I mean, the worst weather, they're still out there, pretty astonishing. Okay, I also want to mention that if you kind of look around over your left shoulders, sort of, but you don't have to, there's a very small exhibit of my artworks there. And because I've exhibited here several times, I've also played as a musician here, but that hasn't happened for a while. Anyway, to be honest and correct, I decided, please don't think that I'm trying to get you to do something, but I just feel like sharing the truth. To help the library survive, we're all looking for ways to keep the maintenance cash flowing. So I decided that if anyone buys one of my artworks while I'm exhibiting, I'll give a 25% to the library. And everyone benefits from that, that's all. All right. And oh, there's 2 I wish I'd brought. Can I? Let's see, who could, can you go get a Lori, you know, the cart lady? Just pull it off the rack. I'll explain that in a second. Thank you. There are several people in this audience who know Lori the cart lady, right? Raise your hand if that sounds familiar. Yeah, look at that. And so I've been so moved by her, and I'm hardly alone in that matter. There are all sorts of people who care about her and find ways to support her and worry about her. I mean, hundreds of people. And she spends 7 days a week going up and down the streets of Somersworth and Dover with a cartload of her belongings. And she's got the legs of a tackle. I mean, she is in very good shape. It's a sad story. Anyway, so I painted this portrait. I just wanted you to know. And actually, to my everlasting delight, someone here tonight bought it because she knew her for 10 years. So if you see her, you think about that. And I really am not going to be anecdotal all the time, but I have one more that happened. I went down to the new Aroma Joe's in downtown Berwick to have a coffee and look over my notes. And in came a guy. He looked very lost. and he was in rough shape. And his shoes were so worn out that there was hardly anything underneath his feet. And I just think we're very lucky people, right? Who knows the story behind that guy? I could have written a story about him. Who knows? And he wandered in and then he wandered out. So just a way of saying I'm so happy that all of us can be here doing what we're doing. So to set the tone, I'm going to play, not me, my daughter, who's right there, Amy, is going to be the technician, and I'm going to ask you to listen to two songs. The first one, a Disney favorite, it's because they are going to help, I hope, all of you think about the connection between these two songs with very different moods and the protagonist of my book, Cecelia Middling, whose life starts out like a dream, and it doesn't necessarily stay that way. You'll understand better. So, and just sit and relax and enjoy it, because you'll know the song, and I think some of you will know the singers who are just stunning. Thank you, Amy. A great song. It's a chance to celebrate top-notch musicianship, too. That was treated as a classical piece, right? It is just gorgeous. So, a wonderful version of a wonderful song. And as I saw it, listening to that, that's what caused me to add this. It made me imagine Cecilia's frame of mind when she was still little more than a toddler, all excited about having a mother and a father early in the book, and moving to California, moving from Sausalito, California to North Dakota. Imagine the culture shock, right? Yeah. And she was full of optimism, and that song to me speaks about how she was until things started to change. She was in When You Wish Upon a Star mode without doubt. And I could easily imagine her tucked into her bed late at night, singing to herself, "When I wish upon a star, everything my heart desires will come to me." We wish it had. But as she begins to grow physically, emotionally, and intellectually, as often happens in our lives, she discovers that things are not always going to be so rosy, especially at home. And where a child needs the most to have in her life is unconditional love. That's when we can imagine her singing the following song. One more. Sung equally beautifully here by another favorite song of mine, the iconic girl group from the 60s, the Shirelles. This is the later Cecelia. A lot of you will know this song. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, on a very different note, now I'm going to put my foot on the accelerator, believe it or not, a little bit, and say, on a very different note, I often ask myself, am I an emerging artist? How many are familiar with the term that's everywhere in the media? Emerging artist. Oh, she's an emerging artist, right? In fact, I have an artist here. Can you, let's see, Amy, can you bring me a copy of my book? I'll explain why in just a second. And while she's coming up there, others may wonder how it could be. This is people who don't pay attention to what's really going on in the world. They say, he can't be an emerging artist. Look at him. He's 80 years old. How could he emerge? He's de-emerging. It's a rather grim way to put it. Well, anyway, so it just happens that I have in my book, we have an artist, I mean, we may have more than one artist, but we have one of the finest artists in northern New England and beyond. He's sitting in my audience, spent 20 years working with him as a picture framer, and I included his fabulous, it's a sketch, it's more than a sketch, it's kind of a caricature. Tom, wiggle your hand. There, Tom Glover. Now, Tom has an opening at a really nice gallery tomorrow night, and I'll be there in Portland at the Cove Street Gallery, and it's a smash exhibit. So anyway, there is the drawing he did of me right after I came home from Scotland and England in 1997. See the little hat? Yes. And that hat, I loved it until I threw it in the laundry and left it too long, and it became 1/3 its size, and it looks like a toilet paper cover, right? And I never, oh, so glad to have you here. Bless you, could find a chair for, oh, there's another artist too, right here. Oh, yes, Judith Hellman. Oh, she's a terrific artist. I'm so pleased to have her here. Okay, let's see. So, I just wanted you to know that. One time I was here in Berwick, and I was working pretty aggressively to try to, market myself as a visual artist, which is not a very especially pleasant thing to do. And I saw an ad in the the Portsmouth Herald for emerging artists. So I went down there, and I took my resume and I took samples, and I walked in there, and everyone was very sweet and young, and they couldn't have been more polite. And I said, "Hi, you're having an emerging artist exhibit, and I'm interested." And she said, "We only take emerging artists." There's a huge lesson in that, right? And I said, "So as I wrote in here, I don't get it. I am emerging. You don't seem to understand that, right?" So I wanted to say something about that. And Cecelia was emerging too. Cecelia was told at a very young age what a terrific writer she was. And we can either carry them to the heavens by encouraging it, or we can be tone deaf and not understand that Cecelia was going to be a damn good writer. It already was, yeah. So she experienced a lot of hostility because because she was a young girl, they didn't really see how that could happen. That's not going to happen. It's a presumption that so many people make. So what is an emerging artist? Well, one popular definition is a creative individual whose work is beginning to gain recognition within the art world. Emerging artists are often just starting out and are working hard to build their portfolio, establish their... Did I say portfolio? Yes, I did. Oh boy. See why I'm not teaching in college anymore? That was a malaprop, and I'm proud of it. I'm human, right? I remember that, portfolio. Sounds like Stacy Single would have said that. So young people often just haven't learned yet that people who look old and look like they're preparing for the promised land are actually busy generating new projects. They're growing. I like to think that we are growing before we even got out of our mother's womb. We're busy growing. Yeah, and then we're growing and growing. And listen, I'm 80 years old. This is part of the preacherly part of me. I'm doing this now that I've reached this age and I love the arts. I didn't publish my first book until I was 70. And a friend who's here, another artist, oh my God, yes, Ann Strout, said, "Well, I don't get why you're saying you're done writing. Why don't you do 3 books instead of 1? Well, I've bettered that. I'm working on my 4th, and I'm hoping before I go to that place, I'll have 5 books on my list. That's my goal. It may be an artificial goal, but it's amazingly powerful. Instead of thinking, well, I can stand to do 1 more, I say, I'm going to go through hell, and I'm going to try to have this many books. It's all about keeping yourself young, right? And motivated and valuable to everyone around you, right? Because the more creative you are, the more people appreciate you and they grow from you. Brief description of Cecelia by Moonlight. In this way, you'll have a better sense if you were to read the book, get a structure around it. Cecelia by Moonlight, The Problem with Intelligence, is the poignant star-crossed tale of Cecelia Middling, the unplanned product of a casual 4th of July celebration. They don't always come planned, do they? And a sexual encounter. And her less sophisticated West Coast parents, Clay Middling and Avis Birdie Girdner, soon discover that they discover a year later that, whoops, there's a baby coming. They were anything but ready to handle the responsibility. But when a moment of reckless frivolity, they escape trendy Sausalito, California, and reload to the politically conservative town of Minot, North Dakota, and enroll Cecelia in the local elementary school, that their problems dramatically escalate. Cecilia's 4th grade teacher, the well-educated, idealistic Alec Thornwood, can see right away how formidably intelligent she is, and against the wishes of her hyperprotective parents, a growing number of Minosians, they do say that, I like it, and a clique of jealous, troublemaking teachers goes out of their way to nurture even while Alec Thornwood goes way out of his way to nurture her brilliance. And they don't like that. They resent him. They feel dissed by not only her, but the teacher who took such wonderful care of her. How the young, headstrong Cecelia Middling struggles to cope with the ever-growing hostilities around her is at the very heart of Cecelia by Moonlight. It should remind all of us that nothing warms the heart and nourishes the intellect of the young like fair treatment, respect for intellectual gifts, and unconditional love. Okay, my definition. What is an emerging artist, I think? Aren't we all? Oh, I already did that. I'm not going to take you through that. We are all growing, we're all emerging, the end of that section. How did this book come about? It was Lori the Cart Lady. Did I already just do that? Yeah, Lori the Cart Lady. I would see her as I drove around town like everyone else, and I thought, what is her story? It can't be an easy story. You don't do this 7 days a week. You don't actually lose control and stand in the middle of downtown Somersworth raging, throwing things. It's just speaking, baying at the moon. And so she'll have days when everything is sweet and you think, even though she must be absolutely exhausted, and then she has days when she can't control. That's why I wrote this book, because I did not try to copy her at all. It was just the germinal idea, what is the story? So I'm very proud of her for being the motivator. I've thought about telling her this, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I might finally tell her that I wrote a book about her and hope that she's thankful. Yeah. So the similarity is there with Cecelia too, who had such big ambitions, and then things started to go wrong. Hey, don't forget, it's still Women's History Month, and I look at that fact as one of the good reasons to consider my book, because it's about a girl with formidable intellect whose parents can't see it, and 2/3 of her teachers can't see it. It's when we give them the gift of recognizing how intelligent they are and giving them the fuel for it that changes the world. And so I think of myself, think of Cecelia and how she might have been after the ending of my book, which you won't be told tonight, right? And I'm not playing games. It's just everything is an evolution, right? Okay. Cecelia by Moonlight is about what happens when the intellectual potential of one sibling in a family is taken more seriously than the other. It's a dangerous path that we often have to deal with, because sometimes one of our children man, she's a gift from heaven. The other one, man, it's driving me crazy, right? And you have to be very mature as parents to work that through. So I'm just going to very briefly say, maybe one of the reasons I commiserate so much is in a very fundamental way, it happened with me when my brother is taken seriously as a science-oriented person, and they always thought of me, oh, he plays the flute in the band, and they saw me as less intelligent because I didn't do well in math and science. I spent decades thinking I was intellectually inferior, and then I came to life. I said, what am I doing? Yeah. So that's why I love Cecelia so much. I feel some camaraderie with her. And finally, on that score, when the biological destiny of the female is thought by the people around her to be more a nurturer than a thinker, it is often at the expense of her intellectual ambitions. In short, low expectations instead of great expectations. Oh, I got to tell you this. I promise you I wasn't planning to say this. But imagine what happened to me in the middle of this. This is just like Cecelia. I came home to visit my parents in Michigan, where we moved here 50 years ago. And I said, I'm going to go over to the local newspaper, and because this woman had hired my mother to be a reporter for the little Leslie local Republican. And I was so eager to go over and say, I'm so happy that she really appreciates being able to write. And I walk in the door and introduce myself, and he said, she said, are you the smart one or the other one? This is what it was like for Cecelia. This has happened not just to me, but it's devastating. Yeah, it really is. Okay, so see, enough of that. Now, we're almost, I'm doing better than I thought. I have 3 samples to read, and then we can break and I hope talk and have some water and some ginger snaps and some Hershey candy bars, you know, those little ones that you eat 12 of them, thinking that you're being very frugal. And you're welcome to do that. So, and I chose these 3 carefully, and they aren't super short. And I'm so glad that I allowed time for this, because to me this is the meat of why I guess you'd say I'm trying to interest people in the book. Books are never just a story. There are always many levels of thought, contemplation, and I like to think that this book will show that to anyone who reads it, that it's actually a very serious book. There's a lot of very colorful language. That's because the world they grew up in, that's the way young people talked. That's also the way 20 and 30-something parents talked. The setting was in the mid-60s. Nothing unique about the mid-60s, but that's where I set it. And swearing can be therapeutic. It can offend some, but it's incredibly therapeutic. You want to test my theory? Let's go drive around, right? Because people lose their temper, and so Cecelia was just crammed full of increasing anger. So, and part of it, her parents were good teachers. You know, they were all so angry about things, and so there was a whole lot of cussing going on. And the fascination for me as a writer is to capture why that would be and run with it. And I'm not suggesting that the whole thing was written to see how many cuss words I can put in, but we know the truth about it. Yeah, some wonderful people swear all the time. Some really unpleasant people don't swear at all. Surprise, surprise, right? So I've got to tell you this one carefully, but I just so glad I pulled this out of my hat just now. I was a picture framer for 20 years, and one time a guy came in and it was like a rat-a-tat-tat of F words were just blasting out of his mouth. I said, man, we got all these customers around, and I said, be patient. So finally he said, well, I'm here because I collect shoes. Yes, I collect, and I need as many shoes as I can find. And I said, for what? And he said, well, I'm a missionary. And we go down and we take shoes and give them to the kids, right? You get the point. I never forgot that. Okay, but there's a lesson in that too. You can't be certain that a person is awful because they like certain unpleasant words. And you certainly cannot be certain that they're saintly if you do like my grandmother. Golly gee. What were some of the others, Amy? She had gosh all fish hooks, you know. She had every substitute that I didn't bother to substitute. Yes. Okay, so each quotation is designed to share a different element of the book, and I think that would take care of it. And it's an honest way of letting you know how the book, more or less, how the book would feel if you read the whole book. Passage 1 is in which Clay and Bertie, the ones who ended up making the baby, had just finished their one-time unplanned sexual encounter on the 4th of July, and kind of set up for it by a friend of his, and he didn't realize what he was getting into because the female in this encounter was far more older and prepared to go for it. And the result, both of them were in denial, but then they realized that there was a baby. So they had just finished their encounter. Deep down inside, Clay knew he was ashamed of himself. He'd been reasonably certain it was going to be nothing more than a guilt-free summertime romp in the hay, so he was quietly shocked to discover that to him she was much more than a simple conquest. He was attracted to her as a person, as a personality. Even worse, he knew he really hadn't been up to the challenge as a lover, and he stood there in the darkness watching Bertie move slowly toward the door and out of his life, perhaps forever, his eyes filled with tears. "Don't worry," she said, and then she blew him a kiss from across the room. "Hey, you were terrific. The way I see it, it's good when it's wild, and it's good when it's tame. It's good when it's fast, and it's good when it's slow. Yes, you were in a hurry today." Kind of business life, if you ask me. So big deal. Honestly, I thought you were adorable as a bedmate. So what's the problem, Captain? "The problem," said Clay, "is that the moment I saw you today, I was genuinely attracted to you, all of you, and I wanted to impress you. But as you know all too well, I got smashed instead. And even though I knew from experience that I can't handle that much booze and make things happen in bed, I went ahead and tried, and look what happened. It ended up making a complete ass of myself." "Look, we'd better leave it at that for now," said Bertie. Then she stepped back across the room and handed him a slip of paper with her phone number on it. "Put this in your wallet," she said. "You'll have it for a rainy day. And don't you dare think I'm going to forget you, because I won't. The fact is, I like you, really. And who knows, someday we might have the good fortune to cross paths again. Wouldn't that be lovely?" "Well, maybe so," said Clay. Maybe so. I'll think about it." So Bertie found her way downstairs, then stepped out onto the lawn, and headed for her car. Though it was chilly outside now, she stopped for a moment to watch, shivering as a spectacular series of blue and yellow chrysanthemums brightened the late-night sky. Only a handful of guests were still on the property, some of them still tanking up, others either passed out on their lawn chairs or groping each other in the lush, clandestine nooks and crannies of the Dolliver estate. Clay watched Bertie glide across the emerald green, expertly manicured lawn, her sleek blonde hair shimmering in the moonlight, and then turned wistfully away and set out to find Dory. He finally tracked him down. Dory was the close friend who set poor Clay up for the encounter. Found him in the caretaker's utility shed, putting chairs away. He pitched in and helped him finish the chore, and moments later, weak-kneed from boozing and audibly short of breath, they climbed into Dory's car and settled in for the trip back to Marin City. So that was passage 1. Passage 2. This is a passage in which, after running away from home finally, couldn't take it anymore. What was happening in home was nothing positive. Cecelia thumbs a ride with Fenton Clevenger, by the way. Between you and me, I can't think of anything more fun than coming up with names for characters. It's just such a wonderful adventure. Yeah, and I listen to them. I say them over and over again. I make sure there's not 3 Fenton Clevengers listening in Berwick. And I do. I check that very carefully, and I love doing it. You know, words to me are like music, and if it sounds like very mellifluous and it flows, Fenton Clevenger. It worked for me, right? And I won't forget the name. So Men can be so, she had just thumbed a ride with him, and he's driving a 10-wheeler. Because that's his correction, is a long-haul trucker who quickly discovers he's just picked up a highly intelligent but seriously combative young woman. Men can be so stupid, she snapped. This was in the middle of a conversation. I mean, why make trouble when there isn't any? Why do men do that? Genuinely insulted by her youthful insolence, Clevenger hit the air brake, swerved off the highway, and came to a noisy, inelegant stop. So you think I'm stupid? I have to shout a little bit here or you won't get the message. So you think I'm stupid, he shouted. You think I'm uneducated. He reached over and grabbed a beat-up, coffee-stained paperback off the dashboard and waved it aggressively in her face. Here, he roared, have a look at this. Cecelia yanked the book out of his hand and turned it over and mouthed the title quietly to herself. Tropic of Cancer. Holy shit. And then Cecelia had read Tropic of Cancer cover to cover late at night by flashlight when she was only 13. She was smart enough to know that if her father had found out she'd been reading a book as sexually explicit as Tropic of Cancer, a book she found out later on that her teacher, Mr. Thornwood, had read and thoroughly enjoyed, he shouldn't have told her that, he'd have had an absolute fit. Guess I owe those dudes big time, she laughed, Thorn to herself, Thornwood for admitting to me he'd read the book and enjoyed it, and Miller for writing it in the first place. You know what? Thanks to them, I know a whole lot more about sex than I might otherwise have known. The book had also taught her the importance of never allowing herself to feel ashamed of anything having to do with sexuality. She put the book back on the dashboard, then stared straight ahead of her, at a loss for words, which wasn't easy for her. Why so silent, he said. Are you surprised to learn that a hairy, ham-fisted guy like me, a man who drives a semi for a living, also happens to read some really heavy-duty books in his spare time? Does the truth about me offend you in some way? Have I shattered your image of what a working stiff is supposed to look like and do and be? None of the above, she whispered. I guess I was just a bit surprised that you'd be reading a book like Tropic of Cancer. I don't know why, he said. I mean, it's just another book. You know what I like most about Fenton Clevenger? He talks to her as if she's an adult. He wasn't getting that from her parents. And he loves her, right? And it'll become more and more obvious if you were to read the book. It's about a whole lot more than kinky sex and wild abandon, but of course you wouldn't know that, would you? You really should read that book sometime. It's a real humdinger. He doesn't know that she read the book. Cecelia winced at his snide remarks, but decided not to stir the conversational pot by telling him she'd already read it and a whole lot earlier in her life than he did. Besides, she was exhausted now. She figured that without all the mental badminton, she might actually have a chance to fall asleep and then wake up tomorrow morning refreshed. But Clevenger was not done. I've also read Kafka's Metamorphosis, he said, ready to provide her with a long-winded, self-congratulatory litany of the beloved classics he'd devoured over the years. Proof positive, he presumed, of his undeniable literacy. Shelley's Frankenstein, Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian. I even wrestled with Principia Mathematica for a while back in high school. You know, the one he wrote with that flaky number cruncher, Alfred North Whitehead. Yeah, finished it in just 3 days, too, but guess what? Old man Quackenbush, my calc teacher, he gave up on it only 3 pages in, said it was way too hard for him. Well, you know what? When my classmates found out about that, he became the laughingstock of the entire school. I want to tell you, we really had that old geezer's number. There, that's the end of that one. And one more. Then we get to eat. Yeah. Passage 3, in which Cecelia, hitchhiking back to the experimental forest, and by the way, when she runs away, she loves being outdoors, she loves the outdoors, and she loves dancing by moonlight, which will be alluded to in many ways in the book. She's passionate about the outdoors and the moon. She's in love with the moon. So she asks Fenton, where can I go? I just want to stay outdoors. He said, oh, how about Denby, North Dakota? There's a an experimental forest. I don't know if any of you know about the experimental forest, but they don't have so few trees that the area decided to experiment by loading a whole bunch of acres with trees that never otherwise would have grown there. And she loved it, and she camped out there, while running away from home. She needed only 10 minutes to snag another ride, this time from a genuine, oh, that's right, I'm in the third one. I didn't set that up properly. Passage 3, in which Cecelia, hitchhiking back to the experimental forest in Denby, North Dakota, and I checked for the pronunciation. At first I thought it was Denby. It is not, so they say. Picks up a ride from an eccentric octogenarian farm woman. Hey, I have a farm woman in the audience. She's a professional farmer. Yes, wiggle your hand, please. She runs the Winslow farm in Falmouth. It's a fabulous place, and she described me once as I love this, a feminist farmer. And she is. She's very devoted to all the common sense ways we support women, but she's an expert person selling vegetables and fruits and flowers. Yes. All right. So she was a genuine Ma Kettle, not her, look like. Did I dug myself deep into that, didn't I? Let me start over. She needed only 10 minutes to snag another ride, this time from a genuine Ma Kettle look-alike who was decked out, paradoxically, in freshly pressed bib overhauls and a pair of squeaky clean Betty Boop sneakers. She was well into her 80s and immaculately groomed, and while her car, a fire-engine red 57 Chevy Nomad, was crammed full of hay bales and miscellaneous farm implements, it managed, in spite of the cargo, to come across as if it had just rolled off the assembly line. Fortunately, there was just enough room up front for Cecelia. Yeah. So, where are you going, Cupcake? Asked the driver. Her twittery, high-pitched voice was a perfect match for her. She must have been only 5 feet tall and fragile as a hummingbird. Anyone farther away than Cecelia would have thought that behind the steering wheel of that car was a tiny child dressed as an adult and pretending to be a farmer on the way to market. Cecelia wanted to burst out laughing at both the woman's cotton candy voice and her odd appearance. But she decided that not only would it be improper to treat a woman of her age with such disrespect, it would accomplish nothing. Oh, just going east, she answered. Beyond that, I don't really have a plan. I mean, not at the moment anyway. Well now, said the woman, if you ask me, not having a plan doesn't sound like a plan worth having. But I didn't ask you now, did I? Oh, impertinent. Oh, she's about 15 at the time. And sassy, right? If you ask, but I didn't ask you, did I? We're almost done. Didn't mean no harm, said the woman, then reached over and patted Cecelia affectionately on the knee. Tell you what, honey, I'm going to go only as far as Michigan this morning. Got to deliver a shitload of bales to some old coot with a barnyard full of horses. She waved her hand back toward the rear of the car. Can't smell them? Oh, I can smell them all right, said Celia. Oh, yeah, no doubt about that. But Michigan, that's a hell of a long way to drive just to deliver a carload of hay bales, isn't it? Not Michigan, laughed Gertie. Not the state, I mean. Michigan City. That's where I'm going. There is one in North Dakota. The way I see it, the mitten might as well be on planet Jupiter. There's nothing to do there, nothing but them silly Great Lakes to gawk at. Whoopie-doo. I mean, what's so damn great about the Great Lakes? Compared to the Atlantic, they're nothing but a string of rain puddles. So why would I ever want to go there? Anyway, sorry about the odor. Hay can smell pretty awful after it's been sitting out in a cloudburst, but business is business, ain't it? Got to do something, what you got to do. I know, I wish I could get you farther than that, but I have to go straight back to my place afterward and do some serious sleeping. It ain't easy getting up every morning at 3 a.m. to take care of a barn full of hungry bovines, you know what I mean? Anyone actually a farmer here who's been through that? I think there are some, yeah. Well, sure, I really do understand, Miss. Miss Nothing, said the woman. Gertie's the name, Gertie Glidden. Oh, nice alliteration, said Cecelia. If you say so, said Gertie. Of course, I had no idea what the word meant. My first name's actually short for Gertrude. I always hated that name, so I figured, why keep it? That's when I went ahead and took the root off the Gert. My old man was really pissed. But Mama, bless her heart, went straight up to him with her chin sticking out like a battering ram and said, listen, darling, it's her body, so she can call it whatever the hell she wants to. And so the name stuck, and by God, I'm keeping it. Lucky you, said Cecelia. She hoped Gertie hadn't seen her rolling her eyes in something fast approaching disgust. She was already exhausted from listening to the woman's meaningless chatter, and it was relief to know the ride would be ending at Michigan City. And believe me, sweetie, Gertrude continued, you'll be glad you got to see that town. Not everyone knows, you know. I mean, the place is famous. In 1945, right after the war was over, a Great Northern passenger train ran right up the rear end of another train outside of town. I checked the accuracy of this. 309 injured, 34 of them deader than a toilet full of turds. She was a colorful woman. Most of the victims were young, grass-green squatties returning home from the front right after doing their patriotic duty against them horrible Nazis. Stinks, don't it? All right, Gertie, Cecelia said. Thanks for the history lesson. Sorry it happened. Now, about that name change, I understand. And if it'll make you feel better, I wouldn't have wanted to get stuck with a name like Gertrude either. Anyway, Michigan City will be just fine with me, and I'm looking for tonight is a place to eat and a nice clean bed. Can't afford anything fancy. Almost done. Gertie's eyes lit up like the headlines on her Nomad. Then she glanced over at Cecelia, smiling broadly. My godchild, I know just the place for you, for the food and the bed. It's Strickland's Chow Down and Sleep In. Friendly folks, good news, private bathrooms with the flush toilets. Yes, can you imagine? And they really got rid of them. They finally got rid of them pesky cockroaches just last month. Anyway, cockroaches are not the place. It's just outside of Lakota, so I'll have you there quicker than a cow with the shits can make a pancake. Lakota, never heard of it, said Cecelia, sighing more audibly than she should have. But that's all right, Gertie. It's all I need to know, promise. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to do some serious sleeping myself. Thank you. And I'll bet you would, too. Thank you for everything. So I hope you come and have something to drink. That was great fun. So there's the little snacks, and, come say hello or talk to each other, I hope.